Hey everyone, thank you for coming out. I know it's been a long day. I know some of you have been pitching. Thanks for coming out and pitching. I hope I saw some of you. I'll see some others tomorrow and then Saturday. So I decided to call this presentation Demystifying Fundraising. It sounds cool. It's really not. It's going to be short and simple. And hopefully, I'll be reiterating some of the things that you've talked in the morning or you've heard from other people and shed some light onto your fundraising processes. So a little bit about myself. I think I've made full circle from the investment side, then to entrepreneurship, and then back to investing again. Right after college, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was excited to go into the workforce right away. I went to London. I started out with Morgan Stanley, which is a big bank, and I started doing investment banking with them, which I absolutely hated. Thankfully, the 2008 financial crisis happened, and I had an opportunity to get out of it because all of these offices and divisions and departments all over the world were shutting down, looking for stuff that was, higher growth, higher excitement. So I came back to Turkey. I joined a private equity fund. And for those of you who don't know what private equity funds do, they're like bigger VCs. They invest in older companies that have a lot of traction. They hope to take over these companies, turn them around, help them grow, and then hope to exit from them at a profit. So I did that for a while. I learned a lot. I know I interacted with a lot of really good operational teams and owners and saw a lot of huge companies get to even bigger levels and make money for their investors. But my last 6 months at the private equity fund, I started getting really interested in the internet ecospace, especially in Turkey. And I couldn't convince my fund back then to invest in these little technology startups because all of them were too small and the VC ecosystem hadn't really emerged back then. But I was so convinced that I quit and built my first company, which was a gaming company. It was called PeakGames. It did amazingly well. We raised over $35 million in funding. We had 300 people. It was a success story. I exited from that company in 2013, and then I built a new company, which was a vacation rental marketplace, again for this region. So with two of my companies, I started in Turkey and either expanded globally or expanded regionally. So now I'm back to investing again with 500 startups, but this time around, I'm investing in technology startups, especially early stage technology startups that are just starting out, maybe at the idea stage, or maybe a little bit later, who need a lot of help, but more importantly, access to capital, which is difficult to find. So a lot of the time, my entire day, I used to think as an entrepreneur, what would VCs do all day? Because I thought they weren't doing anything. And I was right, because all day long, all we do is listen and meet with entrepreneurs and try to understand what they're building, whether their team is capable enough to build what they've envisioned, and how we can help them. So a lot of the time, I hear startups pitch their ideas, and most of the time, unfortunately, we have to say no. And saying no is difficult, but I think what's more difficult is for the entrepreneur to not have clarity as to why VCs or investors or angel or seed investors are saying no to them. So maybe you've heard a lot of this. There's so much material out there with way more seasoned investors in the world that have really thought about this and wrote extensively about it. But I'm going to try to give you my take. I think investors, or maybe I can say myself, look for 3 T's. That is team, traction, and target market. And I think if you talk to investors from different stages, you're going to see, a couple more criteria, a couple more options that they look at in trying to assess the validity of a startup. But I think these 3 things are present for all stage investors from all over the world. So let's talk about team. What do we talk about that? Many a times, I meet with a startup, a young or a more seasoned team, who spend 45 minutes telling me about the intricacies of their business without spending a minute as to introducing themselves or the rest of their co-founding team. I find this interesting because I look at a VC and a startup relationship like a human-to-human relationship. So imagine when you're meeting someone for the first time, what you do is you introduce yourself, and maybe the biggest icebreaker question that everyone asks each other is, what do you do for a living? Like, what is it that you do? Who are you? Like, what do you like doing? So it's not that social aspect, but as a VC investor, we want to know in a brief setting who these people are. So if you're the type of person who has had some domain expertise in what you're building, if you're working on a machine learning startup, which is very hot these days, there isn't one startup that doesn't use the keywords machine learning or AI. If I had a cent every time I heard those words, I'd be a millionaire. But if you're building a startup in these domains, and if you had done your PhD in machine learning and then went on to work with a research institute in a remote country, working on incredible data sets and self-learning algorithms and networks and neural stuff, like all of that crazy things, if you've done that, tell me that in the beginning. So the rest of the presentation, when you're telling me about your vision and all of these big problems that you're going to tackle, that I can take you seriously and believe that you can actually do it. Or if you've had a successful track record. This could be whether a startup that you've built and failed even, or a project that you undertook with friends or colleagues, or maybe you were an integral team member, not a founder, but an integral team member in a company that was doing something similar to what you're trying to build, or maybe some sort of an experience that you got out of that. Tell me what your past was that makes it relevant. A lot of the times, and this is the norm, especially in the West, a lot of these entrepreneurs are extremely young, right? So they're in college, right out of college, sometimes even in high school. So a lot of the times, those two elements, like domain expertise or track record or past experiences, don't really apply to these students because they haven't had the time to build it. They've just had an amazing idea, drive, passion, and went into it. So if you're that type of a person, don't worry. A lot of the time, VCs are firm believers in the fact that talented, smart, passionate, and driven people can educate themselves, can learn fast, can adapt, and execute. So if you have no experience, don't despair, but we want to see your excitement. We don't want to see a bored pitch where you don't even seem like you're interested in your own product. We want to see someone who's absolutely and madly in love with what they do. So the second thing, traction. I'm sure a lot of you heard this a lot. Before we can invest, we need to see a little bit more traction. The stage is a little bit too early. This is something I even use, and I think this is extremely annoying for entrepreneurs and founders because traction is usually a black box. And the reason it's a black box, that there's no definite understanding of what it is because it, I think, differs from startup to startup, differs from market to market. What I call traction is momentum, some sort of an excitement. This could be growth in user numbers. This could be growth and momentum in revenue, in number of clients, in number of messages, threads, whatever you process. This could be word of mouth and critical acclaim, or features on Product Hunt or Reddit by a tiny but a super loyal and engaged user base. Product market fit. You can't produce your goods or your services fast enough before the market demands them. You literally can't meet market demand. That's a great problem to have. If your servers are down and if you can't meet demand, that's wonderful. Team growth. Sometimes we see really high-tech companies that require a little bit more time than potentially a social network to see some results in user engagement or revenue or this and that, because they have to really hone in and focus on their technology. But if they've gotten incredible people to join their team, even at that stage, that tells us a lot, because these people who are really smart, who have expertise in your domain, if they believe in your early stage idea and leave everything else to join your team, that also tells us VCs a lot. So as you can see, I've talked about a lot of things when I call traction. I think the main takeaway is find the one metric that's doing really well for your early stage startup. Focus on that and pitch your entire story on that. So the other day I saw this SaaS business that we actually invested in, and they're gearing up for another round, and it's chatbot analytics company, and they were talking about their current traction, and they were talking about, their current number of clients and this and that, and all of those, triple-digit numbers didn't look so exciting for a Series A company. And I said, instead of focusing on the number of clients you have, which takes a lot of time, there's a sales pipeline in integrating and starting with clients. Why don't you talk about the number of messages that you process? Because with this, we see, even if your client numbers aren't increasing, if they're sending you more business, if more of their messages are being processed, I can see that there's value proposition to your service, because your existing users are demanding more and more of your platform and your services. So in short, just find one thing that is growing, that has momentum, that is a key factor. Not only pitch the VCs around that story, but try to understand that metric and see why it's growing and why it's driving your business forward, and focus on that in operationally as well. And the final, and I'm kind of ashamed to admit, is my Achilles heel and what I look at, because a lot of people look at team and that's the generic answer. But my answer is target market. This has been talked so much. There's an incredible blog post of Mark Anderson, actually, I think from 2007. Search for it and read about it, where he quotes Andy Rachleff, and he says, when a great team meets a lousy market, market wins. When a lousy team meets a great market, market wins. When a great team meets a great market, something special happens. I see this every day. I see amazingly talented people with an incredible product in a market that doesn't exist. So if the market doesn't exist, you're never gonna get product market fit. And I can almost hear you say, but if the team is really good, they can pivot. Pivoting is one thing, but pivoting in the wrong market, or the lack thereof, leads to impossibility. In my personal point of view, and in my previous startups or companies that I've invested in, or the companies I'm seeing now that are struggling, I think the number one reason that startups fail is because they're trying to address a market that either doesn't exist or isn't big enough. We see these in regional or local companies, sometimes clones of big Western ideas that have been brought to their home markets, and there's a market, but it's too small. So that's what I also mean by the lack of market. How do you know if you're in the right market? If you're in the right market, you know, because you can't produce your goods and services fast enough. As an entrepreneur or a founder, you shouldn't be pushing your product or service to the market. You shouldn't be teaching people how to use it or spending all this time in trying to create market adoption. If there is a market, the market will literally pull the product or the service out of your company. If the market is huge and it's growing, even mediocre teams and mediocre products thrive on the back of market growth, but not vice versa. And one more thing, with market, iteration is key. So if you've gone through several pivots, you don't have to be an early stage company. Sometimes I see companies that have been around for 4 or 5 years with tiny scale. And when they start telling us their story, we understand that sometimes they've been in the right market, but their approach was a little bit off, but they persevered, they listened to their users, and kind of iterated to find the right product market fit. So if you've been around for a long time, but if your scale is still small, but there's a story behind it, own up to it and tell it, because that's also a positive sign. So all in all, there's so many things VCs look at. There are different VC approaches. Some of them ask you all these long due diligence questions about financial projections and legal issues, this and that. I don't ask for any of those things, especially at early stage. In my entrepreneurial lives, I've made a ton of those financial projections in the early days. These are all hockey stick. I've never met my financial projections. I've either overperformed or terribly underperformed, but never literally met my financial projections. So I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in understanding the team vision, whether they're capable, what traction they're seeing, what their market looks like, what the competitive landscape is like, how their product is different within that competitive landscape, and how they're going to spend the money that I give them, because that's more important to me than financial projections or sometimes the nitty-gritty due diligence questions that a lot of VCs ask their entrepreneurs. So this is me. I mean, I knew I wasn't going to take the entire 20 minutes. But as we are seeing more startups throughout these 2 days, or maybe you'll find either myself or someone else from 500 and go to our office hours, you're going to see that this is the types of questions that we're going to ask you and we're going to expect to hear from you. But don't take this as only an advice from one VC. I think this resonates with VCs all over the world. While you're honing your pitches, make sure that you're prepared to answer these questions, take feedback, be super positive, but more importantly, show me energy. I don't want to hear boring pitches or bored people. Like, have fun and be excited, be angry, show some reaction. That's the most important thing. Good luck to you all. If there's any question that I can answer now or later, come find me. I'm going to be around. And I wish all of the entrepreneurs the best of luck. I've been through your process. I know how hard it is. I know how it's like the craziest thing you can do. I did it twice. Not sure if I can do it again, maybe in the future. But hang in there, and if we can be of help in any way, come find us. Thank you.